Happy New Year, everyone! I hope you had a great 2023 and a great holiday. Hopefully this video comes out soon enough for that sentence to still somewhat have meaning. 2023 was an interesting year for me, as I debated a lot on what to do content-wise, with a lot of video ideas either getting pushed back or straight up cancelled. So my New Year's resolution for this year is to not make any promises for what the next video will be, because at this point I think I'm like 0 for 6 for promised videos. Anyways, one thing I always do look forward to at the end of every year is my Anime of the Year video. Not only because I get to nerd out about all the amazing anime that aired last year, but also because it forces me to watch series I wouldn't have watched otherwise as I prepare for this video. 2023 has been an amazing year for anime. The medium just keeps hitting higher and higher peaks, not only in animation, but with several hyped up series making their debut, and several hyped up arcs of continuing shows getting animated. Action, comedy, slice of life, every genre had several contenders for different categories. This was probably one of the harder years for me to narrow down choices for each category because of how many contenders there were. The categories I'll be judging on haven't really changed, however I am discontinuing the most disappointing category, as I've grown less passionate for talking about something I didn't like. And overall, a lot of the disappointment I feel nowadays centers on the anime industry's condition, with tons of series having so many delays due to production companies demanding faster releases with higher quality than ever before. Maybe in due time I'll become better at voicing my opinion on these matters, but at the moment I'd like to focus on the amazing products these employees put out despite the odds and the treatment they face. I watched a total of 36 anime this year, and just like last year, I will not be counting anime that are continuing over to next year through continuous cours, which is unfortunate because the series that fall under that category are extremely heavy hitting. Series like Frieren, Apothecary Diaries, and Undead Unluck are extremely good. As a reminder, everything in this video is my opinion, and I judge highly based on how much I personally enjoyed certain aspects of a show. AKA, I'm gonna be very biased, so some picks are gonna be pretty interesting for most people. However, I hope that through that, some people discover an anime that they may not have paid much attention to last year, and enjoy it as much as I did. Anyways, let's move on to our first category. It's one of my personal favorites, and an aspect of anime I still think is massively underrated. Soundtracks are something I will always say is underrated when considering how good an anime is. A good soundtrack can instantly make a show better, and a bad one can make a show a lot worse. OSTs have the potential to elevate scenes to a whole new level. However, creating a song that can perfectly fit a scene is really hard. A song that will stand out while not being too distracting. Most soundtracks get a passing grade by just going along with the scene, but the soundtracks that elevate the scene are OSTs created by someone who knows that scene perfectly. The first runner-up is one I'm sort of cheating with, since 99% of the anime's OST comes from one of the best game OSTs of all time. Nier Automata version 1.1a aired in winter of this year, and was made by 1A Pictures. The story of this amazing series is just as good as in the games, and the animation is really nice too, but the OST is still probably the best part of this series. With how well it sets the mood and scene for the anime, the soundtrack still stands out in every scene just as it does in the game, and that's because, as I said, it is literally just the game soundtrack with one added track. Tracks like City Ruins just instantly make the scene better. Keiichi Okabe has created a timeless masterpiece of an OST that of course works its magic on the anime just as it did for the game. The second runner-up for this category might surprise some people, but I have to give credit to Jujutsu Kaisen for an amazing OST. JJK's music is a really underrated aspect of the series and how it sets tone, and I think it was a major contributing factor in setting up the surprising tone shift the series itself took in this season. The OST during the start and even a good amount into the Shibuya incident arc is very laid back and arcadey sounding, which perfectly fits the past Gojo arc. Tracks like Delirious and With Rage really stand out in their fight scenes, conveying the mood while still keeping that arcadey tone. I do think the standout track has to be If I Am With You, which 100% stole the scene with Riko, and the track was just as impactful when it came back later. Further on in the Shibuya incident arc, the music along with the story takes on a darker tone, especially when involving a certain character. However, that original tone almost never goes away. When not used directly with tracks like With Rage playing during fight scenes, it was elements of those earlier tracks heard faintly in other tracks with a darker tone. Or, you know, just an entire idol song in the middle of one of the most intense fights in the season. But as much as I love Jujutsu Kaisen's OST, I knew the winner of this category before I even considered JJK as a runner-up, that being the amazing OST of Insomniac's After School. If you follow me on Twitter, you probably saw how much I was gushing about this OST when the anime was airing this summer. Yuki Hiyashi made an OST that fit an anime about insomniacs flawlessly. It is probably one of the most relaxing OSTs I've ever heard. I straight up used this OST to sleep for my flight to Europe this summer. Even afterward, I still use it pretty frequently when I have trouble sleeping. The OST just makes it so easy to fall asleep to. The soundtrack is seriously amazing just on its own. Combining it with the show makes for some of the best vibes ever. It's not just the relaxing tracks either. The OST has some more lighthearted tracks for the goofier moments in the show, but even those don't lose the underlying tone of relaxation either. The official Spotify playlist has about 50 tracks, and I can't get enough of all of them. There is not a single song on this playlist I dislike in the slightest. An honor which was only previously owned by my favorite anime Eurocamp and the One Shot soundtrack. The wonderfully calming OST combined perfectly with the story and wonderful visuals from Linden Films to make the most impactful soundtrack this year. Even if you don't want to check out the anime, at least check out this masterpiece by Yuki Hiyashi. At the core of every anime is the animation, and if you're anything like me, animation matters a lot. Not in the sense that I need the best animation all the time, but that really good animation can elevate my enjoyment of a show exponentially. The first runner-up might be surprising to some, but personally, Trigun Stampede had some amazing animation. Airing in the winter season of this year and animated by Studio Orange, if you haven't noticed, Trigun Stampede is entirely CG animated. I know CG animation is a pretty hot topic in anime, but I personally think Studio Orange is probably the best studio at utilizing it. And if you give Trigun Stampede a chance, you'll find that it's really well animated, and does things in ways that normal animation couldn't convey. I especially like how well they conveyed emotion with very diverse and expressive face animations. The fight scenes are also some of the most unique and interesting fights this year, being able to follow the characters through the action cleaner and with a lot of really creative backdrops. I think it's time we start moving past the whole CG is the worst thing in the world stuff. Trigun Stampede shows that if used correctly, CG animation can do things 2D can't, and can be just as enticing as 2D animation. So give Trigun Stampede a watch. You won't regret it. The second runner-up for this category is one that is probably here because of my bias to color, but personally, Zom 100 was one of the best animated shows this year. Airing in the summer and animated by the newly created studio Bug Films, Zom 100 had a lot of expectations to live up to, as a lot of manga readers hyped up this series. And boy did it make a splash, for several reasons. But let's focus on the good ones. Zom 100 had one of the best premieres this year, turning just the first chapter into an amazing first episode, with animation popping alongside the creative direction. And this series loves its color. Everything after the first episode is made to be as colorful as possible, especially with the creative direction to have the blood of the zombies be a pool of different colors. And of course, the character designs themselves are vibrant and colorful as well, all of which perfectly coincided with the show's vibe and the message it's trying to go for. Obviously, color is not all Zom 100 has either. Even with its very little amount of action-based scenes, they managed to make each one memorable with some amazingly smooth animation, rivaling even some of the better fights this year. And of course, the zombie designs themselves look amazing. Animation made this show very memorable, especially with its first episode. It's a shame that it has the reputation of just being one of the most delayed shows this year, because behind all that is some truly incredible work from Bug Films. As much as I love Zom 100 and its use of color, the winner of the best animation category was just a tier above. It was not only consistently well animated for 24 episodes, but also had the best fights this year by quite a bit. Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 aired from summer to fall with a 3-week break in between the first 5 episodes and the rest of the season. MAPPA, despite getting some flack from employees online, still put out some of the most high-quality animation this year. JJK's first 5 episodes had a completely different style from the rest of the season that generally looked more colorful and cartoony. And if you've seen the season, you'll know why this style almost completely disappears in the second half, switching to a sharper and more dark style. But personally, I think that first style did an amazing job conveying the tone of the first part while still looking like JJK. And you obviously can't talk about JJK's animation without mentioning its fight animations. And to put it simply, they cooked. This season had fight after fight after fight for almost 18 episodes straight, and not one of them had a dip in quality. The first 5 episodes, while not having too many fights, had some of the most memorable ones thanks to its difference in art style, having cleaner and smoother cuts, focusing a lot on the characters. The second half of the season had much bigger fights, with each one constantly one-upping the last. The darker coloring allowed for more strategical use of bright colors, more often than not being used to indicate blows from certain characters and show the impact those had. Every action each character makes is thought out and choreographed perfectly, especially with the hand-to-hand combat. JJK has always had some unique fights, but this season showed that off tenfold, with every character getting in on the action, showing off a plethora of different powers and fighting styles, all of which were animated super cleanly and apparently had people thirsting for Nanami. It's a serious accomplishment to have this many quality fights while remaining consistent, and I wish I could talk about them more, but their nature is almost super spoilery because it's the second season. So for now, I'll leave you with this. If you haven't caught up to Jujutsu Kaisen yet, you're missing out. A lot. This should be a bit of a shorter category because honestly only 2 originals really stood out to me this year, and honestly you could even argue that the 2 shows I'm naming are not originals, in which case there are really none that stood out to me, but regardless I do believe these shows changed the original content enough to be considered original. So starting with our runner-up, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. So, funny story, I originally had a Scott Pilgrim section here, but copyright has made me give up trying. So just know that Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is an amazing retelling of the original story that gave a lot more time to characters other than Scott to flesh out their characters a bit more, and combine that with the original Scott Pilgrim art style being brought to life in animation and the opening of the year, and you got yourself an amazing show. The winner for this category, in a similar sense to Scott Pilgrim, also had a previous adaptation that was widely popular, one that is probably harder to follow up on given its infamous standing in the anime community. Trigun Stampede was probably one of the most surprisingly good anime this year, not only regarding the CGI animation, but in its originality. While I haven't actually watched the original series, I did watch a recap video on it, so I'm obviously an expert. And apart from the first little bit only having some minor changes, the story takes almost a completely different route at the end of the arc within April, with a super important character showing up very early on, and the rest of the series takes us to different places with different characters, showing off these new and old faces in different ways. The producer of the series stated in an interview with the Anime News Network that this series was a new Trigun, and wanted it to be easy for new viewers to come in and watch, and also made it clear that they wanted to focus on things that hadn't been touched on in full in other versions. And while some of the series has remained the same, you can see the switch to focus primarily on the sci-fi aspect of Trigun. The core of the series is still the same, but that doesn't mean Stampede isn't its own thing. The show has its own charm separate from the original series, and that extra charm Orange added to the series was done beautifully. It makes Trigun Stampede more than just an ordinary remake. Continuing anime is something that used to be pretty coveted. However, in recent years, it seems most anime get a continuation. My Hero Academia usually gets a next season confirmation immediately after the last season ends. Series like Shield Hero and Class of the Elite both got greenlit for 2 more seasons at the same time. And even lesser followed series like Reborn as a Vending Machine are getting continuations, a show which I'm sure half of you haven't even watched. Anyways, the point is, while continuations are becoming somewhat common, the quality is somewhat varying from show to show. However, with more continuations all around, you start to see some truly incredible things done with certain series as their story continues, leading to some of the most hype moments of the year. But first, we're going to start off with one of the more underrated continuations this year, Dr. Stone. Dr. Stone is the picture-perfect image for consistency. Its story has continuously unraveled in the best way possible, solving some mysteries while also introducing some newer, bigger mysteries, all while taking you on a science lesson through the ages. Dr. Stone Season 3 aired in 2 parts this year, year, airing an 11-episode core in spring and a 12-episode core in fall. Dr. Stone is one of my favorite sci-fi mystery series, with the base concept being insanely interesting to me, and how over time we've slowly been exploring this new world as we see this new world through the eyes of Senku. Seeing this world fully through the lens of science adds another layer to this already interesting concept. And this season leans a lot into the main mystery of how this world came to be in the first place, with most of the plot of the second core revolving around a key item related to it. We meet new allies and new villains, combining for one of the most action-packed seasons yet. Dr. Stone is amazing at building upon itself, advancing the plot and characters in a way where there doesn't need to be a whole arc dedicated to character development, as they both advance at the same time. Season 4 was also confirmed right after the second core ended, with this season leaving off on one of the most ambitious declarations from Senku so far, with next season looking to focus even more on the true enemy of humanity. In other news, I also get a 4th season of Weekly Science Facts. But even with Dr. Stone peaking higher and higher every season, I have to admit it still can't compare to the peak reached by Season 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen, which is the winner of this category. Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 was on a different level this year, not only as an anime, but as a continuation of the story. I don't think I can even describe how many plot twists this season had, and starting with Gojo's backstory before getting to the Shibuya incident arc made it so that this season revealed so much information regarding almost every character in the series. They then proceed to have some of the craziest twists in an 18-episode span, with the tension and impact of the series increasing exponentially throughout the 18 episodes. A whopping 17 different fights involving almost every character we've been introduced to at this point, and even introducing some new ones as well, all with different and unique abilities to keep the fights fresh. Of course, I've already talked about the animation, but that really was the cherry on top of this massive season. All the fights looked absolutely amazing, keeping even some of the more dull fights in terms of plot relevance interesting, and making the plot relevant fights have that much more impact. And a large part of that was the masterful direction and creative shot angles in every episode. Needless to say, after this arc, JJK will never be like it was in Season 1. Everything has changed, and this season executed on this objective perfectly, going into next season with some new characters, a new setting, and new rules. This category is definitely a bit more of an opinion piece than the rest, but I try and think of how much I enjoyed a show compared to how much I heard about them on social media and from friends. The first runner-up of this category is a show called Dark Gathering. Dark Gathering was a special anime for this year. It was a continuous 2-core show airing from summer to fall and was animated by OLM. The show was a complete unknown for me going in and ended up being the most surprising anime this year for me. I don't think I've ever mentioned this, but I'm a pretty big fan of horror, and horror anime in general has been pretty lame for a long time. While the series is not overtly scary, it does something I wish more horror anime would utilize, making the viewer uncomfortable. And Dark Gathering nails this aspect perfectly, taking every chance it gets to make the viewer extremely uncomfortable. Not only is Dark Gathering a good horror story, but it also has several great mysteries to go along with that. And the show is surprisingly funny. The series pulls elements from all types of genres and executes them pretty well. While the story isn't anything crazy at first, with the first arc only revolving around our main characters exploring haunted areas, it eventually evolves into a surprisingly complex story, with more mysteries and an almost Pokemon-esque system with the ghosts, all while doing a great job of not losing its horror aspect. I need more people to see this show. I don't think it'll blow your expectations out of the water, but I can almost guarantee you'll come out thinking it was better than you expected going in. However, if there was an underrated show this year that could blow your expectations out of the water, it would almost certainly be Pluto. Pluto is another series that went under the radar thanks to Netflix's brilliant marketing scheme of literally doing no marketing. I myself didn't even realize the series had released until halfway through November, and even before that I had only heard about it once many months beforehand thanks to its reputation as a manga. Pluto released all 8 episodes all at once and was made by Studio M2, who haven't done much since their creation in 2016. However, the staff for this anime is absolutely stacked, and that becomes very obvious once you start watching. Pluto is underrated in the sense that it is way too good for how little people know about it or talk about it. With the story being based off the manga written by the author of Monster, it ranks way in the top end of anime stories this year. An amazing sci-fi mystery set in a world where robots and humans coexist. The series follows the world's 7 most advanced robots and a plot set on destroying them. The way the mystery is followed through the story brings you on a journey throughout the past and present of this amazingly crafted world. I'm gonna bring up this show again later in this video, so I'm gonna leave the more in-depth analysis for that, and for now, leave you with this. If you haven't watched Pluto already, it should be at the top of your watch list. The series is a masterfully crafted mystery set in a setting that allows for some very interesting questions and answers, served alongside some beautiful animation and a bit of action sprinkled in there as well.
天よ地よ、決してその名を忘れるな。我が名はめぐみん。高魔族随一の天才にして爆裂魔法を操りし者。食らうがいい。エクスプロージョン。
I have to admit, comedy and slice of life series had an amazing year, especially in regard to how many new series there were and how many blew up onto the scene, and especially with how high quality all of them were. Dangers in My Heart, My Clueless First Friend, Spy X Family, Mashal, and a ton more. And I wish I could talk about all of them, especially Mashal. But sadly, this category was so stacked this year, and in the interest of time, I won't break down and make Mashal a third runner-up. I also won't be doing a second runner-up, as I originally had a section on Skip to Loafer here, but thanks to me rambling on about the other two, I had to cut it out to save some time. So yeah, Skip to Loafer is really good. You should go watch it. Go watch it now, right? Please, go. The runner-up I do talk about here is probably one of the bigger indications of my bias for some series. Konosuba, An Explosion on This Wonderful World, aired in spring and was animated by, surprisingly, not Studio Dean, but instead Studio Drive, marking the start of their takeover of the Konosuba anime. And I have to say, this showed off an extremely bright future for the series, not skipping a beat from Studio Dean, feeling very similar to the previous series while changing directors. However, it did feature some key changes that I think make the series better. Studio Dean did an amazing job making this anime about the cast, bringing out the chemistry the characters had in the novels into the anime. They also did a really good job with its animation direction and accentuating the comedy in the series. However, they did take a few creative liberties in their adaptation, with the biggest issue I had being leaving out some of the more serious moments from the light novels in favor of anime original comedy. I always felt like Konosuba had the potential to take itself a little more seriously sometimes, and then when I started the light novels, I was surprised to find out it did, it just always got cut out. This is what Studio Drive excelled in while keeping the series mostly comedy. It picks and chooses its moments to actually take itself sorta seriously, and have some character building moments. And the animation with Studio Drive has also improved while not losing that charm Studio Dean gave the characters. As a final comment, with the novels ramping up the character moments as they go on, the Megumin spin-off shows the team at Studio Drive will be a perfect fit for this series going forward. It's a tough act to follow considering how much I just talked about the Megumin spin-off, but there was a show in this category I considered better than that show. Insomniacs After School, along with its amazing OST, is also just an amazing series. I'll refrain from talking about the OST anymore, but it really is just the perfect fit for this series and makes all the scenes better. Putting the OST aside, Insomniacs After School is a series following Maguri and Nakami and their journey to live and deal with their insomnia. The main characters in the show are done extremely well. The voice actors and directors did a fantastic job showing off their relationship and growth in it throughout the series, following them at the start of the first episode as brief acquaintances before finding a connection in their insomnia, leading to them slowly and naturally growing closer as they work together to deal with this unfortunate circumstance. Both characters work really well together despite their apparent differences in personality. Their relationship is far and away the star of the show, by the end of which both characters are almost completely different in terms of their outlook on not only their insomnia, but also their outlook on life. The side characters are also really well done, being presented over the course of the show as interesting characters themselves, and I'm really only bringing this up because Shiromaru is the best side character ever. This is non-debatable. Anyways, Linden Films really has this whole night setting down packed. The animation was consistently solid with the night scenery looking downright unbelievable. And I know I said I wouldn't mention it again, but the OST really does tie this all together, creating one of the best vibes in any series this year. Insomniacs After School is a relaxing and warm series with a lot of emphasis on its characters, especially the main two. And if any of what I've said sounds appealing to you, please watch this series, you won't regret it.
恋の呼吸5の型揺らめく連城乱れ爪
Action and shonen series are some of the most popular series out there. Almost anyone who's watched anime has seen a Shonen Jump series. But along with that popularity comes a higher quantity of action series in order to cash in on that popularity. And not all of them are good, but when they are, they stand out like no other anime can. And this year saw a good chunk of standout action anime. The runner-up for this category is Hell's Paradise, another one of those animes that in most years would be pretty high up in a lot of these categories, but this year is buried under a mountain of other just as amazing anime. Airing in spring this year and animated by Studio Mappa, Hell's Paradise was another fairly hyped up series coming into this year. And while it did have its fair share of production issues, the show still turned out to be one of the best anime this year, and I think a lot of why it was so good can be attributed to its action. Hell's Paradise has a really unique premise that allowed for a lot of creativity when it came to its action and storytelling. The story follows an assassin sentenced to death named Gabimaru, his executioner Sagiri, and their trip to the island of Shinsenkyo in order to find the elixir of immortality. Them, along with several other criminals and their executioners, are sent in a large group to the island to find the elixir. Failing to come back with the elixir results in the death penalty being carried out on the criminals. The cast of characters is really unique and vibrant, with each prisoner having a different ability that, in my opinion, usually complements the characters themselves, almost acting as a second lens to see the character from. The series follows these characters in separate groups of varying sizes, each showcasing a lot of fun interactions, not only in combat, but in just general conversations as well. Each character has a unique power or a unique style of combat, and it makes every fight super interesting as you try to figure out what happens next. While I admit the cast of characters is pretty large, you get to know the main cast pretty well by the end of the season. The setting is by far one of my favorite parts in the entire series. The island is completely shrouded in mystery, mysteries which only seem to grow as you learn more and more about the island and its various inhabitants. Uncovering the mysteries in this series is such an amazing journey, as the series handles them with lots of care while not revealing too much at once, giving you just enough to be satisfied yet hunger for more. And to top it all off, the animation is just as amazing. I especially love the color design, which, fun fact, is done by the same guy who did the coloring for Tactopi Destiny. I was actually a lot lower on Hell's Paradise than most people at first, but upon rewatching, I actually liked it a lot more upon noticing the large amount of tiny details this story has. It's really amazing. Overall, Hell's Paradise is one of the most unique anime this year, and is the start of an amazing action series which I cannot wait to unravel more of. I do think it was quite obvious, but the winner for this category is far and away Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2. When it comes to high intensity and impactful action, Jujutsu Kaisen is like no other. Whether it's the first half of this season and its more unhinged fun style action, or its more dark and jaw-dropping style of the second half. Every fight has you on the edge of your seat, even with characters you didn't think you cared about. Good or bad, every character was growing as the season went on, with characters gaining new abilities or enhancing old ones. Add in some new characters with new abilities and you have one of the best action series out there. The shivers I got when watching some of these fights was something I hadn't felt in a long time, especially as the series goes on and starts to give you the consequences of these fights. The OST, the animation, and especially the voice acting made every scene top tier, but all those things are especially noticeable in the action scenes. In fact, most of JJK Season 2 is action, and it's all the better for it. JJK is already one of the more unique anime out there when it comes to power systems and how it handles its characters, but this season showed that and then some, introducing new characters and powers while not leaving old characters in the dust by also improving upon them as well. I've talked about JJK a lot in this video, so there's not much more I can say. Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 was a masterpiece of an action that produced several amazing fights, which no doubt will go down in history. Well, here we are, the final showdown. This year was crazy for anime. I enjoyed so many shows this year, and so many more impressed me beyond belief. Shows went above and beyond with animation, intricate storytelling, soundtracks that ended up being at least 50% of the reason of why I liked an anime so much. And this isn't even including shows like Apothecary Diaries and Frieren, the latter of which is my favorite manga of all time. All this culminated into one of the toughest decisions in my 2 years of making this video, as in my eyes, I honestly think there were 4 anime worthy of the Anime of the Year title this year. However, of course, I'm only going to limit myself to a runner-up and a winner, with 2 very quick honorable mentions. So, without further ado, let's get into the best of the best from this year.
はい。勝負はこれからだろう。ああ、そうか。そうだな。そうかもな。
Given how many categories JJK Season 2 was in or won, it might be surprising that of the anime considered, this is what I had as my first honorable mention. Don't take this as the show is worse than those above it, but take it as a showing of my biases for certain aspects of other shows. JJK Season 2 is without a doubt one of the best action series from the past few years, and it honestly may take a while for someone to top it in terms of sheer impact of story in a continuing series and fights. I'm super excited to see what comes next, as there's no doubt in my mind that the series that was the first season is completely gone, and it'll be replaced with something entirely new. This season had so many twists and turns and pulled them off all flawlessly. To put it simply, JJK is a blank slate and can go in so many different directions. So if you're an anime only like me, stay off Twitter for the next 2 years before you get spoiled on a very important character's death.
こんな景色が見れるなら眠れないのも悪くないね。
I'll be honest, a good 50% of why I like this anime is Yuki Hayashi's OST. One of the hardest things to do for a series is create a soundtrack that perfectly fits the theme of the show, and even the story to an extent. Hayashi went above and beyond, making an OST that practically spells out the identity of Insomniacs After School, elevating the rest of the series' aspects. Insomniacs After School was not only one of the most heartwarming shows of last year, but has an underlying story with these characters dying to be explored in future seasons. It has some of the best character progression I've seen in an anime like this in a long time. It's funny, it's interesting, it has some amazing stills, it has an amazing OST, and it has the best vibes of any show this year, making you want to sit in an open field under the stars for hours on end.
Nani? この力。
これが僕の本当の力。
Pluto was one of the most surprising anime this year, and it really shouldn't have been. Just look at the author of the original manga and the absolute insane staff. It just goes to show how good of a job Netflix has done in burying this show so no one even knows about it. Pluto is an amazing mystery series that constantly keeps you on your toes in one of the most impressively thought out sci-fi worlds I've ever seen. You learn about this world through its characters, as their role in the story means they played an integral role in making the world the way it is. The amount of intricate and complex detail they've managed to convey in 8 episodes is amazing, and some of the most natural and impressive world building in anime. The main cast is quite large, but does center around 2 main characters. However, I consider all of the 7 most advanced robots to be the main cast of the story, as it does revolve around them. You follow them and their attempt to move on from their past, their demons, all the while something drags them back. We do follow Kishit the most and his journey as a detective to uncovering what is coming after all of them, and his character progression is done really well, balancing that alongside solving the main mystery of the series, which is also done really well, dropping little hints throughout the series in various ways. The animation was stellar. While not flashy, it was consistently smooth, and when it did decide to be flashy, it pulled it off flawlessly. The voice acting is another amazing part of this anime. I already mentioned how good the main cast is with their writing, but their voice actors all nail their characters, making the emotional points even better. With a series like this, it of course dives into all the normal AI/sentient robot questions, and I think it does handle some of them better than others. Specifically, I think it nails the potential for a robot to kill when it isn't supposed to, a theme which goes along great with the other themes it tackles, like war and its after effects, which is also done really well. Pluto is another amazing addition to the recent uprising of sci-fi series, alongside shows like Vivi and 86, which have made sci-fi all the more better in recent years. Pluto does everything it needs to and then some, being without a doubt one of the best adaptations this year.
Arigato, Meriru. 届いたよ、君の声も。
Trigun Stampede was truly something special this year. Taking an all-time classic in anime and trying to recreate it is enough pressure by itself. Combine that with trying to remake it in your own way using CGI animation and a whole new spin-off story from the original, I can't begin to imagine the amount of pressure that Studio Orange had. But they took their time, 5 years to be exact, and what they produced is nothing short of amazing. As I mentioned, Stampede isn't a complete faithful retelling of the original story. It's more than that. Stampede is its own thing. The director even stated in an interview that he hadn't even watched the original, as they wanted to make everything from scratch. They wanted a story just based off their collaboration with the author of Trigun. As they put it, it's the result of cherishing respect for Yasuhiro the writer rather than the work called Trigun. And you can feel how much effort was put into this series to make Stampede its own thing. It's especially evident in how they wrote the characters, and the more prominent focus on the sci-fi setting. Stampede is an amazingly written, character-driven show. While most of the main cast at their core is the same as the original show, they're all written with a fatal flaw, and by the end of this series, every character has gone through a character arc to either fix that flaw, or in Vash's case, come to terms with that flaw. Vash is a character I especially want to praise the writers for. He's written in conjunction with his brother Knives, and just like in the original, they are both essentially complete opposites of each other in almost every way, both ignoring part of each other's viewpoints in order to believe in their own ideals. Vash's belief in the human race for good versus Knives' belief in the human race for evil. And this conflict and clash of ideals is by far the most interesting part of the show for me. Seeing Vash battle his ideals throughout the entire show was a super interesting character arc, because at the end of the day, Knives isn't entirely wrong. Vash and him have both seen firsthand the horrors humans do not only to each other, but to their kind as well. Another layer on top of this conflict is the fact that despite fighting, Vash and Knives both very clearly still love and care for each other, especially Knives, who believes Vash is misguided and just wants to help him see things his way. All this culminates into an amazingly animated battle in the last episode, filled with so much emotion as Vash and Knives struggle against each other in a battle of ideals, against the person they care for. And this whole tangent was just Vash and Knives' characters. I could go on and on about Wolfwood and Strife, but we don't really have the time for that. The point is, all the characters in this show, even the ones that don't appear for very long, are extremely well written. The animation is a point of confliction I've seen in reviews, but personally I believe the CGI animation gives Stampede a unique look, with several qualities that you wouldn't be able to find in other shows, which goes to show how well the staff handled this show. The love and care they put into this series is readily apparent. I think one of my favorite fun facts about this series is that on the Trash Taste podcast, one of the producers revealed they made a book containing the entire history of the world they were creating. More specifically, they created a book with 150 years before and after the crash, which is absolutely insane. And you can feel this in the anime, with the show being one of the most creative settings this year. Everything down to the character designs, the music, the prop design, all of it culminated into one of the best science fiction shows of this decade. Trigun Stampede is not only a love letter to the original creator and their work, but also to the new fans wishing to start enjoying the creator's work. This is a group of characters I certainly won't forget about for a very long time, and this series has definitely set itself up for more content in the future. So without a doubt in my mind, I will be there for it. This year in anime has been quite interesting. We had a ton of amazing sequels, a ton of new adaptations, and even the end to one of the most popular anime in recent history. Overall, this year was probably one of the strongest years yet, as the quality of anime just keeps reaching higher and higher peaks. Because I suck and I'm writing this so late, I can already say that 2024 is off to a great start. Mashal, Frieren, Undead Unluck, and Apothecary Diaries are already coming out strong off the bat, and new series are already impressing me. We also already have our controversial anime of the year that will be discussed forever on Twitter. But for now, that's all from me. And again, I'm really sorry this video came out so late. Hopefully one day I can actually have impulse control and finish a video before hyperfixating on a game franchise with 3 30-hour games. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a dandy rest of your 2024.